Hey, everybody, welcome to the show. Today we have gathered to discuss the Netflix series How to Sell Drugs Online Fast.
Parentheses.
Today, in parentheses, fast. I am one of your hosts, Jay. On the line today, we got Adam,
Yo, that's me.
we got Aaron,
Heyo.
and we got Tony.
Hello.
Hey, this is going to be a new beginning in some ways for the show. We're trying out some new talents. So I'd like to welcome to the show Mr. Tony.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
So
man.
Tony,
Sorry,
before we get into the show today, just give us a little background on your TV show preferences.
I don't know. I guess these days I do binge a lot of Netflix. I'm big into the HBO shows.
You're into the primo television.
Yeah, I like the high quality stuff. I do like to watch wide variety. Usually if my friends whose opinions I respect recommend a show, I give it a shot, try to get into it.
What's the most obscure show you've seen?
Obscure? I don't know. To avoid being nerdy, I watch anime sometimes, so I don't know if those qualify as TV shows.
They absolutely do. Absolutely.
Obviously, Adam is also a huge anime freak.
Absolutely.
Oh.
Yeah, I love anime as well. I was actually, when I asked that question, I had thought of a very obscure anime whose name I've actually forgotten. It's so obscure.
It's so obscure, he doesn't even remember it.
Well, it's funny because, like, you know that like genie online, you can ask questions, like 50 questions or something, and it's supposed to
Google?
like, well, no, it's like I forget the website name. Anyways, you're supposed to be able to. It's supposed to figure out whatever you have in mind just by asking you questions, and usually it's pretty accurate. It was not able to figure out the main character of the show.
Couldn't even find it.
Couldn't find it. Had to enter it in as an entry. Anyways, I digress.
Well, Tony, we're glad to have you. Especially this was a little, even though it's a Netflix original, it felt a little obscure in my mind just because it was in German. I feel like there's going to be a barrier to entry for some people in watching the show on Netflix.
Yeah, I don't even know if I saw it kind of, Netflix likes to promote their own shows when you first get on. I don't remember seeing it kind of like shoved in my face or anything.
Yeah, 2 seasons. I never heard anything about it till Jay had mentioned it on the show.
Yeah, I think anybody I know who's watched this show is because I told them about it, and I don't even remember how I came across it.
Well, it has an 89% on Rotten Tomatoes from the audience score. There's no tomato meter score on the show, so it's pretty around the board positive response to this series.
Right. We have the story of a German high school student who he's been in a long-term relationship, but his girlfriend goes and spends a year abroad in America
and gets corrupted.
She gets corrupted in Jacksonville.
As one does.
As one does. She comes home to the fictional town of Rinseln, Germany, where she's a different person. She doesn't really want to be with him anymore. Our main character, who I can't believe it, but his name is now escaping me.
Hold on, I've got IMDb.
Moritz.
It's Moritz, yeah.
Moritz.
Yep.
So Moritz decides that he needs to change himself in order to win this girl back, and the way he does it is by getting involved in the ecstasy trades.
Well, and he and his buddy Lenny, who is a disabled gentleman, they are building a website, I guess, to sell in-game stuff between people. I couldn't quite understand that at the very beginning, what they were trying to make.
Like items that you can buy.
I assume so.
Items or even accounts if you don't want to spend time leveling up a character. You just want to have a high-level character. I think that, too.
Oh, that's fair. So they're making that, and he kind of like, takes the code and repurposes it to make it a what is it? The darknet drug trade. Now, this is funny because y'all remember there was like the Silk Road, and there was like this like kind of actually happened, right?
Right. This is based on, or at least inspired by, a true story.
Because I remember like when we were in school, there was a bunch of talk about the Silk Road, this like dark net
Mhm.
website where you could buy like drugs and probably a murderer if you needed an assassin or something like that, you know. So that to me that was kind of interesting because I remembered that happening and it made
Mhm.
this feel a little more real.
Right. I really enjoyed the little cutaways that they would do where they would step away from the story to explain a subject.
Mm-hmm.
They did this pretty soon at the beginning where they explained the effects of MDMA. But I think my favorite was when they stepped away to explain the dark net with Jonathan Frakes.
Yeah.
Uh, like
It's pretty fun.
I the first time I watched through, it just that floored me. By the time it got to that point, I was like, I am 100% in. But on my second watch through, I noticed that just before that happens, it's not really focused on, but Moritz is watching an episode of that show. I don't know if you guys ever watched it, but it was like Mystery Factor Fiction with Jonathan Frakes, where they'd show you a
Mm.
little story, and then at the end, they'd tell you whether or not it was real. Am I the only
I
one who watched
do
this?
not. Yeah, I don't remember
I did
that.
not watch that. Sorry.
No. It was like I'd say like late '90s, maybe early aughts, and it's received a cultural resurgence lately in its memes. Uh, but anyway, yeah. So that was an
That was
aspect of the
awesome.
show
It
I
was
enjoyed.
kind of surreal because I was watching it with the German audio, so I could obviously tell he was speaking English. Like I
Mhm.
should have switched it over to English, but it was weird watching someone speak English but hearing it in German with English subtitles during that part.
Now I think this is is this the first show we've done that was not in English? Because we did
Um,
Cowboy Bebop, but I think the majority of us watched that with the dub.
I think you're right. Um, I personally would be open to watching more shows in different languages as long as it has some sort of translation. Uh, just because I'm pretty used to that. I generally watch subbed animes, uh, and there's a few Korean movies that are pretty good as well. But yeah, I think this may be the first show that we watched in a foreign language.
Did anybody struggle with that, like that, dislike it?
It depends on a case by case basis. Like if there's a dub version, uh, and the voice acting is good, I'm okay with it. If the translation is bad, if there's a sub version, that's kind of my breaking point. But outside of that, like I don't mind at all.
Aaron, what was your experience with the language barrier?
I am having a little bit of a microphone difficulty, so I'm having to switch to a really terrible microphone. But what I will say is that I actually the fact that it was in German kind of stood in the way of me watching it for a week or so, and I went and looked and saw that they had English, like British English dubs, and I put that on and actually watched it with that, and it was really interesting because you could, obviously it's like watching like a martial arts film where like nothing matches when they're talking, but the voices were kind of funny, like some of the voice choices that they made, like it just felt like the person's voice was a little bit awkward, but it was also really funny because they used British slang, like you would see the differences because I also had the subtitles on. You could see the difference between what they were like translating it to say and versus what they actually chose in English to say, and there'd be some slang that was used to fill the gaps.
Mhm.
But I really enjoyed the first season. I didn't watch the second one. I know that I think Adam did.
hmm I did end up watching the second season. It ended on a cliffhanger, and I just kind of wanted to keep going, so I did.
Yeah, I kind of thought we were supposed to watch both, so I finished the second season earlier today, actually.
Oh wow.
It was pretty good. Uh, Definitely enjoyed the show as a whole. I thought it was well paced, and even though it took its time to tell the story. It was a story worth taking time to tell. So,
I'm
sorry,
I'm
that's kind
curious
of
to
convoluted.
I'm curious to hear you guys' thoughts on the way that it incorporated digital life in the way that a lot of the time in the show is spent texting each other or being online, and we would see their screens in superimposed onto the frame that we see. So I was curious to see what you guys thought of that.
Yeah, I'm a big
I
fan of that. I think. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to
no,
interrupt.
go ahead. Go ahead.
I say I don't know. I'm sure it was done well before, but I guess my first thought of when it was done really well like that was maybe that first season of the new BBC Sherlock with Benedict and Martin.
Mm-hmm.
They have a lot where the text. It's not. I feel like maybe before that. I'm sure not. I'm sure it's not the first instance, but it was always like it showed someone's computer screen or showed their cell phone, and then in Sherlock, and then in really well done here. And I think since now it's just like bubbles that pop up while we're watching the show. So it's
Mm-hmm.
the same effect, but better. And then like all the emojis popping over people's heads and stuff like that. I think it adds a lot. It's a more clean way of telling the
Well,
story. Getting information.
it's more immersive in our current culture, right? Like we get text and you see little quick, bubbles pop up in your phone to tell you, hey, someone sent you a message. I also think that this is like I remember very distinctly when After Effects came out and that started being used in movies and TV shows where they would have like really nice overlays of graphic or text on the screen or on the scene. And I feel like this has been one of the best uses of it to kind of create that little immersion into the conversation without having to like be looking over their shoulder at the phone.
Mm-hmm.
It felt true to life because how many times have you been either reading or trying to text somebody while someone physically in the room with you is speaking to you, and mentally you have to multitask. And I felt like the way that this show did that, it represented that true to life.
Yeah, I think in a way of
Computing.
yeah. Sorry, I keep interrupting Adam.
No, it's okay.
It's like a cleaner way of instead of like a person looks off to the side while you hear their inner monologue talking. It's just like a way cleaner version of that. You still get to hear or see their inner thoughts, but it's not awkward of someone just standing still having reactions while they're talking to themselves, like on Scrubs or something like that.
It was a little bit trickier here specifically because if you were watching it in German and reading the English subtitles, then you'd have to read both the text message and the subtitles at the same time. And sometimes it was so quick that was a little bit difficult, but I can't really fault the show for that. They're not making it specifically for a non-German speaking audience.
It had a little element of Breaking Bad Walter White to it with the rise and the thrill of what they were doing, at least for Moritz. I feel like,
Right. We got a blonde partner. We got a disabled character, a family member who's a cop. It's got a lot of the elements.
It just does. Like I know that these are pieces that you could pull and string together any way you wanted to, but I kept thinking that throughout this. I was like, this is kind of like, German graffiti. What was it? What was the American Vandal? It was like German Vandal Breaking Bad edition. It's kind of how it felt to me, like some kids making a show for Netflix, but just a lot more budget.
Yeah.
I will say, like the time lapse of like the pills like dissolving and stuff like that. Those were some really cool, just like visual cinematography that they did for the show that I was really impressed with, like the intro and when they would like explain how stuff works, like all that was really, really well done. I was gonna say, I was having trouble with my mic earlier, but it reminded me of The Big Short in a lot of ways, how they would kind of have those segues to explain something. That's what it reminded me of.
I liked all the breaking of the fourth wall. Like I know they also pulled back because it was, I guess, this is told through a documentary, I guess, on Netflix. They're interviewing him, kind of. But I really enjoyed the breaking of the fourth wall, like the explanation on MDMA. It had the little, like, if you don't want to watch this, just hit the skip button. Like it was like integrated in there.
It didn't actually work though. Did
Oh,
it?
it didn't. I didn't try to click it.
So okay, well hold on. Maybe mine was messed up. That sequence where he's explaining MDMA, mine auto skipped every time because of an add-in. So I had to go in and stop the add-in from working because it was one of those things where it's if you don't want to watch the intros of a show, it automatically skips it for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept on being like, "What's happening here? Why am I missing part of the show?"
That's pretty funny.
Yeah, I think that was my favorite part. That and I feel like maybe it was one of the first couple episodes, he's having his own internet problems, but it fakes like your Netflix is loading, it says you're buffering or whatever.
It was very self-aware that you're watching it specifically on Netflix, and it did it in a fun way.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of reminds me of Metal Gear Solid, where I think at the end of number 2, the game is messing with you, and it would throw up the mission failed screen, but it'd be fish and mailed, and you could still be running around in a tiny box in the window, trying to trick you into thinking that you had lost the game. I love it when they do stuff like that. That's just kind of out of the box, different. Something you wouldn't expect to see.
Yeah, I think it added a lot for me.
Is there anything? Does anyone have any negative opinions about anything? Character, storyline development, anything that you would change?
Well, obviously, we're not supposed to be in love with Moritz, I don't think.
Yeah, he's kind of got like I said, the Walter White syndrome, that he's not really the hero. He's kind of like an anti-hero as the story develops.
Well, he himself is trying to portray himself as a Steve Jobs or an Elon Musk, and neither one of those, when you think of them, you would think, oh, great guy that I really want to hang out with. They're all assholes. That's what he wants to be.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't change that, right? That's kind of the way that he's supposed to be portrayed.
No, I think it's an interesting way to characterize him, because I think that draws a distinction between him and Walter White, because Walter White is motivated by all of these things really outside of his control. His growing family, his cancer diagnosis, his relative poverty. While Moritz, he's just a high school kid who wants his girlfriend back and has a bruised ego. His motivations really set him apart.
That's a good analysis. I like that.
Now, I did want to kind of get a little bit into the plots, and broadly what happens here is that there's a popular student at the school, Daniel, who is now courting Moritz's ex-girlfriend, and he is, at the beginning of the story, is kind of the school drug dealer. And so Moritz finds out where he buys his ecstasy from, and it's this man named Buba, who runs a pizzeria inside of a horse stable. That was a fun detail.
Albanians, but not really Albanians.
Right.
Fake
so
Albanian.
He's a fake Albanian because apparently in Germany it's a stereotype that the drug trade is prosecuted by Albanians. So it helps if you're going to be involved in the drug trade to portray yourself as one, even if you aren't one.
Also,
kind of seems like a dead giveaway, for police.
Is that kind of culturally, in the United States, if you see someone who's Rasta, you're like, oh, they probably have weed. Do you think it's something like that over in Germany, where they just associate Albanians with drug dealers because that's what most of the times they experience them as?
I don't have any data, but I would say probably.
I don't even know where Albania is.
It's in the Balkans, down by Greece and Croatia.
The Balkans.
The Balkans. I mean, but Albania is notorious even outside of Germany for being run by the mob, and just everybody's involved with crime. But there was a specific moment at the end that I wanted to discuss with you guys, which was kind of the climax of the whole series, where Bubba has basically kidnapped our two leads and then Daniel. and Lenny has created a 3D printed
Gun.
handgun with one bullet, and Bubba gets his hands on it and basically is saying, "This is a toy. I can't believe you'd bring this to me," and ends up shooting himself in the head with it. Well, that's at least the way, that's what we see in the show.
That's what's portrayed. Yeah.
That's what's portrayed, and almost immediately afterwards we cut to the frame narrative Netflix interview with Moritz saying, yeah, that's definitely what happened. But we've been taught over the course of the show that what Moritz is telling you happened isn't always necessarily what happened. He's an unreliable narrator. So now I'll caveat here for those of us who have watched season 2, we get a little bit of an answer in season 2. But did you guys feel like that left it ambiguous as to whether Bubba shot himself or whether Lenny shot him?
I did not watch the second season, so I was left with the impression that Lenny shot him, and that they decided the story was that he took the gun and held up to his face and killed himself by accident.
See, I 100% agree. That's exactly what I thought too the first time I saw it. I thought that was telling us that Lenny shot Bubba, and like, whoa, like I thought that was huge for him.
I think that's the impression they were intending to give as well, and I'm not really sure why, other than to just kind of like bait you in for season 2. But I thought it worked out really well. That tool or mechanic they used.
Yeah, I think I'm dumb. I just kind of took it as face value. I was like, you have to know something ridiculous is going to happen to get them all out of this situation. I feel like that's what happened a lot in the show. Just some sort of ridiculous thing bailed them out. But
well, I mean,
and thinking is clear. Yeah, he's definitely unreliable.
Like, I mean, tiny spoiler in season 2, but we see some CCTV footage early in season 2 of the event, and that shows Booba shooting himself. So that seems to confirm that that's what happened, because that affects the actions of characters outside of Moritz. So they seem to tell us that Booba actually shot himself, and I was disappointed by that. I thought that it would be a lot more intriguing, compelling if we had Lenny have to deal with the fallout of shooting Booba, even if it was out of self-defense.
I only watched the first episode of the second season, and I feel like Lenny's demeanor, though, would have been radically different if he shot him. Sure. And I felt like he was, and like I said, I only watched like one episode in, but he was more interested in the girl and, his romance than he was in anything else, right?
Right.
Or at least the awkwardness of it.
I did think it was the tiniest bit humorous that the one character in this show who drives, at least amongst the young people, is the disabled one. Like, he's the one with the car.
That's a good point. Do you think that was a social commentary of sorts?
I think maybe it's more practical that he has equipment that he needs to move around that other people don't. So it's just more of a necessity for him than it is for the others.
I just, I didn't see the second season, so I don't know if they get into this. But if you're hauling in all this money, like, someone's going to notice. Like they're dropping off their mail at one mailbox.
Mm-hmm.
That's not that sophisticated of a system. And I feel like at some point people would kind of start to order it and trace it back and try and, figure out a way to reverse engineer it. So to me, that was one thing I was like, you ain't even going to different mailboxes? Is there only one mailbox in this entire town and you're just stuck with that? So that was something that was a bit unbelievable for me.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're doing all this stuff to make sure that everything's secret, right?
Right.
A small suspension of disbelief is not how smart Lenny is, but just like how also mostly normal he is to be that smart. Like, they're all big nerds, but they're not like I feel like how big of a nerd you'd have to be that good at like do something no one else in the world has ever done before as far as coding an untraceable website to sell drugs.
Yeah, there's not like one drug dealer that has a coder friend that's tried this before.
Yeah, that's true.
And whenever they were like, oh, we're gonna make it on the the live net or whatever, the light net. I don't remember what they called it, but
They called it the clear net.
The clear net.
Yeah.
That to me, like I was like, everyone's IP is recorded. Like everyone who buys drugs from the website they're gonna know that they bought drugs from the website. Like that's kind of one of the reasons for the darknet is that it's not just that they can't trace where the websites are, so they can't trace who goes to the website, or at least if you do it right.
To my understanding, they were using Tor, which bounces your IP back and forth between many different locations, making it untrackable. And that's why I'm not sure why they were calling it ClearNet, but I'm pretty sure at one point they did say they were using a Tor system.
I think that was the beginning before they went live on the clear, because they were just on the darknet and they didn't really have that many worries.
But the ClearNet is essentially like Google, like it's normal internet, that anyone can get to. Like I'm just saying, like Pirate Bay has been shut down 30 times.
So, I mean, true, but I think we all know somebody who's bought drugs on Craigslist.
I don't know. To me, that's just like where people get stabbed. So,
no, I'm not saying it's a good idea, but I'm saying that people do it, but that's a good point that they're if in real life this would get shut down much more quickly than what we see in this show, I think. Which I think that is what happened in real life, since this is inspired by something, because the guy behind it from Leipzig, he went to jail. So,
damn.
But wasn't there like an assassination attempt or something like that, or there was more it was more than just the website that he went to jail for, right?
Oh, I don't know.
I feel like I remember.
Sorry.
That's it.
Was the Dutch in season 1 or the Dutch?
Yeah, he goes to Rotterdam and gets involved with those people because at first he's getting from Booba, then he meets Purple Rain, who drops him the packages from the airplane.
That sequence was funny.
Right, and then he gets involved with the people from Rotterdam who murder the pilot.
Yeah. Which that was kind of nuts when that happened, and like it really gave you behind the scene look at like the kind of people they were dealing with, and they didn't even realize
they're kids.
Well, yeah. And then this is kind of where it's getting difficult for me, is because I watched season 2. I'm not sure which parts of the story had progressed with the Dutch.
I think they had just launched the clear, like at the very end of season 1.
Right, they'd basically just started working with them at the end of season 1. And speaking of the Dutch, I think we talked about this in the group chat a little bit. Like watching it in German and then having the Dutch people come in, there were points where the conversation was in both languages, and to understand the scene, you had to understand that Moritz wasn't understanding part of it, but it was all subtitled in English in a way that, to my ear, I'm not sophisticated enough to
tell the
hear
difference.
Dutch and be like, that's Dutch. So there's another podcast that I like that has come across this problem, and they've offered a solution of what if different languages were subtitled either in different fonts or in different colors, but in some way that differentiates them so that that these two people are speaking two different languages.
There's definitely like an episode of an anime Trigun where the main character is like running through the town, and all of a sudden, like his kind of demeanor changes and he's like crying, and he at the end of his statement he's like, and why am I speaking French? But because I watched the English dubs whenever I was a kid, watching it was all in English.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really, really weird. But then like one day I switched it to the Japanese, and when it got to that part, it actually was in French, like that portion. So, it's funny how you miss things when you don't watch it in the original.
Right.
For sure.
And maybe it was just me. I felt like they just left off the subtitles for the Dutch, like when Moritz didn't understand. But maybe that was more when there was more interactions in season 2, they did that.
Yeah, I think that might have been a season 2 thing because in season 1, there's points where they're saying things to each other like, "Oh, hey, how do you say this in German?" Um, and that was really my only clue that they're not speaking German.
Yeah, same here.
Rotterdam looked pretty freaking cool though. I don't know about you guys.
I think it is supposed to be pretty cool. I think it got bombed to hell, I think.
Yeah, I think that's why it's so modern now. Well, I guess really all that part of the world did, and different cities decided to rebuild in different ways. But Rotterdam chose a really like ultra modern architectural style that I really like.
Mm. Old Europe's not so old after all.
It's true. It's very true.
Well, I guess, are we ready for some ratings?
Sure. So for Tony and for anybody else listening for the first time, we wrap up each episode by rating the show. We give each show a 0 to 10 rating, 0 being terrible, 10 being awesome. And we'll just go
For context.
Mhm.
Tell him what the highest rated show that we've done is and the lowest rated show. Do you have that data?
Yeah, sure. It looks like I believe, if I'm not mistaken, The Righteous Gemstones, the HBO Danny McBride comedy, is actually the highest rated show we've ever done, followed closely by Band of Brothers and Russian Doll.
Mm.
And the lowest rated show, if I remember right, is we watched the first season of Buffy the Vampire Slayer and pretty much hated it.
Yeah.
Terrible.
Actually, I'm
What
checking
were
this,
the-
and we actually
What were
it
the
was.
numbers for
Say that again, Adam.
What?
No,
I
this
didn't see
was
that.
Tony.
This is
So
Tony.
what were
Oh,
the
I'm sorry.
numbers for the higher rated ones? Like, were those 8s or 9s or?
Sure. So the average score for the highest Righteous Gemstones, that was a 9.05, just over a 9. Band of Brothers and Russian Doll were both an 8.75. And then on the low end, the worst show we actually ever did was His Dark Materials at a 4.25.
Oh, that was so bad.
We did not like His Dark Materials.
Okay. Look. Not all of us liked His Dark Materials. I don't remember
True.
rating it that poorly.
I do.
Well, the highest rating was from Adam at a 5, and the rest of us gave it a 4. But as for you, Tony, this is a completely subjective scale. Rate it however you feel.
It's true. This is just giving you some context.
Yeah. So how about Aaron? How about you give us a rating first?
So I thought the show was very entertaining. I liked a lot of things that they attempted with it. I felt like it probably didn't get watched as much as it should because it was in German, and probably they didn't market it very well here. But I would probably say that overall worth watching, worth enjoying. Don't know that I would necessarily go back and watch it again. So because I'm gonna give it a 7.5, like a solid, solid enjoyable show.
7.5 from Aaron. Next up, we got Adam.
I think they did a really good job with the show. I liked the way they told the story. I think I said this at the beginning. I like the pacing, and those are really important parts to me because it really factors into the immersion. If the show feels, I don't know how to explain it that well. Anyways, I think I'm going to give it an 8.5, and I wouldn't really go back and watch any show in particular. I mean, at least none that I can think of. I really like to watch new content. So, I don't know. Yeah.
I just have some shows that I like to watch over and over again. So
I get that a little bit.
All right, 8.5 from Adam. For me, I'm going to come in right between you two guys. This is a solid 8 flat for me. I've watched the show a couple times through now, and each time I enjoy it a whole lot. It's funny. It makes you care about the characters, even though it's a teen show. It doesn't get bogged down in dumb teen shit. It's a visually beautiful show, which you don't really expect from this kind of genre. But just all around great show that I would recommend for anybody else. And I think the fact that three out of the four of us have already gone on and watched season 2, I think just shows the quality of the show. So last up, we got Tony.
I'm just gonna go with my gut. When I first thought about ranking it, to copy Adam 8.5 was what popped in my head. Maybe after hearing Band of Brothers was in that range, I'd maybe lower it just because, like, what can you put above the shows like that? But that was my gut reaction, 8.5. I think, yeah, for what it was and what it was trying to be, I just really enjoyed it. And maybe I'm still a little bit immature where I can still enjoy some teen angst every once in a while. So I wasn't turned off by those parts of it. And yeah, like everyone's said multiple times, the overlays, I loved it when I broke the fourth wall in relation to Netflix and kind of pulled you out of it. Kind of had a couple, maybe more in season 2, Zack Slater moments where like paused and Moritz kind of explained something, but I really enjoyed the ride. So 8.5 is what I'd give it.
All right, 8.5 from Tony. So we've got another 8.5 from Adam, and 8 from me, a 7.5 from Tony. That gives us an average score of 8.125. And if you will vamp for a moment for me, I can tell you where that fits in on our all-time list.
I definitely feel like these kind of shows, like Netflix is dumping a lot into them, and with the pandemic and everything that's been going on, we're going to see more and more content really straight to stream. I feel like they need to do a little bit more advertising because there's a lot of Netflix original content that I just miss because it may have a slide on a day.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm watching Hulu or Amazon or watching on a different platform, I miss those shows, unless it's like a cultural phenomenon like, Tiger King. So I think that's something that they need to figure out how to advertise better. Get outside of maybe your own platform.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, season 1 of How to Sell Drugs Online Fast comes in as a tie for the 6th highest rated show we've ever done, in a tie with the first season of Atlanta.
Oh.
Yeah.
I heard Donald Glover say that season 3 and 4 of Atlanta, like the only thing that'll be able to touch it is The Sopranos. So I have not watched that far into it. But I have watched The Sopranos. The Sopranos is pretty baller.
Well, season 3 hasn't come out yet, has it?
I know, that's what I'm saying. Is I haven't watched, we watched season 1 and 2. I haven't seen of any new content, but I saw a Google News article that there was an interview with him, and he was saying that that's the level of quality he was shooting for. It's like Soprano shit.
Oh, gotcha. I'm just glad that they're continuing on to make it, because there's so many shows from people I like that have done successful and critically acclaimed first or second seasons and then just hung it up, like Master of None. I don't know if you guys have watched Master of None, but it's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And Aziz Ansari, he did 2 great seasons, and then I was just like, yeah, no, I'm done.
Yeah, no, I think that's also kind of one of those shifting things. Like, they have an idea, they do this like little blurb, and then they're like, all right, I'm done with that now. Like, there's a lot of artists who don't have an interest in the long running television shows, so I think that we'll also see some more of that type of content. And honestly, having watched a bunch of British content, that's not outside the norm for outside the United States.
Yeah, and like, fair enough. Like, if you're out of ideas, like, calling it quits and moving on to another project is the smart thing to do. I guess maybe what I should say is I'm disappointed that they didn't have more in the tank for those shows that I liked.
Mm. Well, I mean, you never know. What if they come back like in 3 or 4 years? Like Curb Your Enthusiasm, there was like a 5-year hiatus between season like 8 and 9,
Mm-hmm.
or something like that. Hell, Twin Peaks, 25 years between season 2 and 3. So
That's definitely true in this current way that the entertainment industry is going. Is no show is ever canceled permanently, apparently, unless it has Kevin Spacey.
That's true. Well, I've been looking forward to the next Expanse season. So that's been one of the shows that I was hoping would survive the pandemic, and they apparently had finished recording another season right before the pandemic emerged. So
Oh wow, I need to catch up on that.
it got so damn good. So it's worth watching.
All right, well, thank you everybody for
here. But Jay, you're the only other person that I've talked to in my life that's watched it as The Leftovers. But I think it's pretty
My
well
wife and I watched The Leftovers. It's one of the first shows she made me watch, and absolutely phenomenal show. Interesting, curious, well done, hands down. Jace had recommended to me, and I was just like, "Meh." And my wife was like, "No, damn it, you're gonna watch this."
It might take on a completely different feeling after a pandemic, though, don't you think?
Well, yeah, Christy's watching Last Man on Earth, and like I don't know if you know anything about the backstory of that one. It was filmed in 2015 or 2014, and it says after a virus spreads across the world in 2020, there's no one left in 2021. So
Wow.
I just thought that was kind of weird, like not serendipity, but just happenstance that's what they had written into the story.
That's eerie. Well, gents, shall we wrap it up for this week or month
Absolutely.
or whatever this is?
For this sesh.
For this sesh.
What?
I want to.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
I was going to ask what
thank
shows
Tony
are
for
we
coming
going to
on.
watch for next week? You're not.
We can do that off air.
Yeah, we can do that off air.
Okay.
Because I definitely don't have any suggestions yet.
All right. Well, I want to thank Tony for coming on and being with us today. I really enjoyed having you here. I thought you had some good insights that you brought to the table. So thank you very much for being here.
Absolutely.
For the invite, it was fun.
Yeah, man. I'm glad it. So we watching out for more videos in the future. They are going to be appearing on the Mandamus Radio YouTube channel. You got to do it. So until next time, I am Jay, and this was the Show.
Adios, everybody.
Adios.
Bye.